I'm Melissa Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. Today I'm going to show you how to make a bracelet using various tools. I'm going to be using my disc cutter, center positioning dies, as well as a jump ring maker to make all of my connectors. I'll also show you how to make the little hook or clasp for that bracelet as well. So let's get started. To start off, we need to have our sheet of metal, and in this case I have patterned up 22 gauge copper metal, and I have already gone through and created some markings on here. Because we're going to essentially be creating some washers, I needed to make certain that when I cut the inner hole that I have enough room to still create the outer disc. So I've gone through and separated my sheet out a little bit, and then I've marked approximately the center along those lines. So that way then I can use my center positioning die and it will go ahead and line things up, and I will make certain that I don't cut off any of the edges of that outer circle. So we've got this already done. I'm going to be creating 1-inch washers with 1/2-inch holes. So the first thing that I need to do is cut my 1/2-inch hole. So I'm going to bring my disc cutter over, line up the X that I've marked for the center of this, approximately somewhere in there, in that region. I'm going to place the top piece on here and then do a final check of this to make certain that that is truly lined up. Now that I've got that, I'm going to take my 1/2-inch disc cutter, or that little die. I'm just going to roll it a little bit into some lubricant that's going to help with the cutting action. And then I'm just going to use my brass mallet. I have a 1-pound brass mallet, and I'm just going to hammer this through. I am doing this on a urethane pad so that if I do happen to hammer this all the way through and smack hard, it's not going to damage the sheet that I punch out. Okay, so now we have our little 1/2-inch piece. I now need to take this and I'm going to place this into the 1-inch hole. But before I place this top part down, I'm going to take my center positioning die. Move these things out of my way real fast. I'm going to take my center positioning die, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to just kind of place this in here, rock it around a little bit before I place this top piece down. And what that's going to do is just ensure that I really do have this truly centered, and so that I will have the hole, when I punch it, come out into the center of my piece. And then I've got this perfectly concentric washer. So same type of thing. Going to come in, hammer this. And we now have a perfectly centered washer. I'm going to do this several more times. For my length of bracelet, I need to have at least 4 of these outer washers and 4 of the inner pieces that come out of them, so that we can connect all of those together with our jump rings. So I will go ahead and get that done, and we'll move on to the next step. To make the rest of the bracelet pieces, we are going to make some jump rings, and these will act as connectors. So today I have the Pepe Jump Ring Maker that I'm going to use. First thing I need to do is install my blade. This is a 1¼ inch blade that they provide with the Jump Ring Maker. You can always purchase additionals of those. So we have a little arbor here, and what I need to do is just unscrew the top of this. So I just have a small jeweler's screw set. Just unscrew that. The blade has a notch in it, and there's also just a little pin that sticks up here on this arbor. Let me see if I can zoom you in and you guys can see this a little bit better. Ooh, that was fast. Alright, so anyways, there's this little pin right here on this arbor, you can see. And what I'm going to do, the text or the writing on this blade needs to face down. So you can see that there's a little bit of text there. So I'm going to place that down and lock it into that position with the little pin there with the notch. Take this top, slip it on as well, and screw it into place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install this into our flex shaft hand piece. Here I have my hand piece, which happens to be a number 30 hand piece from my Fordham flex shaft. I'm just going to take my my blade that I've loaded into this arbor. So I need to open it up just a little bit more. Place that in there and tighten that up. So now, to keep us safe, because that's kind of scary to have just a blade sitting out there, so they've provided a sheath or kind of a protector that will help protect our hands as we are doing some of this. So I'll just slide this in here. Now there is a line right here that helps you to align where your blade needs to go. And that's also going to correspond to our cutting edge in here. So you could also use this as kind of a guide. Just sit it on here and line up your blade in there. And at that point, everything should be aligned. And then all we need to do is to tighten up our nuts here. And they've provided a little Allen wrench so that you can come in and just tighten that up onto your handpiece. And you can again just test fit this just to make certain that you've got it in the right place, so that when you go to cut your jump rings, your hand is protected, and it also acts as a guide just to keep everything nice and straight. So we'll take that, attach it back onto our flex shaft, and set it to the side while we make our rings. As you can see, everything is quite compact and condensed with this new setup that they've come out with. I really like it. So I have all my mandrels here, which are done in metric units. So we've got all of our millimeters from 2 millimeters all the way up to, I believe, 12 millimeters. And the larger ones will actually have this engraved on the mandrel itself, whereas those that starting at 4 millimeters, 3.5, 3 and 2 millimeters, or 2.5 rather, I guess, are going to be engraved on the plate where they are positioned, and that's just because they were too small to engrave them on there. Now the mandrel that we are going to use, I've determined that I would like 4.5 millimeter inner diameter jump rings. So I'm going to select the 4.5 millimeter mandrel. And one thing I want to point out is that there is a hole in here, and that is so that we can insert our wire, and it uses that as leverage for us as we are winding this. Now you have a couple of options with the winder. They did provide a little piece that can be screwed to your bench top, and then you can screw, well, you would screw this in first, and then you would screw this to your bench top, and for a permanently mounted winder. But if you don't want your item to be permanently mounted, which I do not, you can actually mount it to the base of this, and that way then everything just stays together nicely. So that's kind of what I've decided to do. So what I'm going to do is position this so that I will be able to place my mandrel in here and then wind this so that I can create my coil. Now I have a hole here in the mandrel itself, and that's going to allow me to insert my wire into that, and it will kind of help give me the right tension that I need as I go through and wind my coil. Now another thing that will be kind of difficult is if I do not have this attached to my table, it's going to want to move. I happen to have a lip here on the table, so I'm going to pull it to the lip, and I'm going to use another tool, in this case my drill press, just to kind of help hold things into place. Now I'm going to insert my mandrel here, but I'm going to make sure that my hole is still exposed so that I can come back in, and I'll bring you around so you can see this. So there's my hole that's exposed, and I've done that so that I can insert my wire into this, and I can use that as that leverage point. So another thing that I'm going to do, I like it if I have my jump rings already polished. So one of the things that I can do with that is take a polishing pad, and yes, this one needs to be replaced, but it'll work for this particular one. So I'm just going to hold and kind of squeeze onto this, not too tightly, but enough that as the coil begins to wind, it'll pull through my coil here, and it will polish everything up nicely. So I'm just going to make certain that my wire is guided so that it lays right next to each other, creating a nice tight coil. And again, like I said, because I'm pulling this through a polishing pad, a couple of things are happening. One, it's helping to harden that wire, and two, it's giving it a nice polish so that I won't have to do that after my rings are cut. And that should be good enough. I mean, we'll have more than plenty for the project that we are working on. So I'm going to cut my wire here at the end, pull this off, pull my mandrel out, maybe, there we go. And again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to cut where I have it attached or placed into this little hole here. And I will then be able to slide off my coil. And now we're ready to cut this. So now we're ready to cut our rings. And I'm going to be using this ring cutter, and it's just a holder. And what I'm going to do is unscrew this. And I really don't even have to unscrew it all the way. I can just leave it here so that I can just come in and place my stuff. But I want to show you a couple of pieces or parts to this. So first of all, there are a couple of springs. You want to make sure that you keep these springs here, and that's just going to help aid in keeping the tension on our top piece here. But in addition to that, you'll see that there's this little stopper here. And this is what we want to bring our coil up against when we do this, okay? And the purpose for that is so that it will have something to kind of push against as we're cutting this coil down this way. So it is kind of important to do that. Now another thing that we want to do is give some kind of a lubricant. Now you can lube up your blade itself, or another thing that you can do is just take some lubricant, and this comes with your jump ring maker, and you can just rub it right onto the coil itself. Just knock off any excess there, you know, and then I'm going to place this here with that lubricant side up right where that cutting is going to happen. At this point, I will just take my top guide back on and screw it back down. Now, you need to give it enough tension that it holds onto that coil, but you don't want to push too tight. And you also don't want to push too tight over here on this end, because there is nothing here to hold it up like there is over here with the jump rings. So just kind of use your eyes to kind of eyeball it, make sure that you don't have too much tension on one end or anything else. Now I'm going to use the lip of my table here again, and then I'm going to place my blade, and again we've already got this loaded. Bring this in, line it up, slip it in. Now you want to make certain that when you put this in that your rings aren't in the way. Okay, so that's why I was saying you don't want to make your coil too long. You could probably make it around 3 inches or so and you would be safe. But anything longer than that, then you might run into your blade. Your blade needs to be in here and spinning without hitting anything at first. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so now we're ready to go. Now, let your blade stop before you pick it up. And at this point, we can open this up a little bit. You don't even have to open it up very far. And you can tip out your coil of jump rings. And there's our jump rings ready for the next step of our project. All right, now we have just about everything ready to go. We have our discs, we have our jump rings, and it's time to start attaching everything. And then once we get far enough along, then we will create a toggle that will just hook into one of our rings here. So I'm just going to come in and place a dot on the bottom and a corresponding one on the top, and just try to keep them directly one across from the other. And again, I'm going to try to make it so that the spacing isn't too close to the edge or too far into the middle of my piece. And I'm just trying to keep them straight up and down from one another. Like so. And now I'm ready to come back in with my hole punching pliers. One of the things that I like to do is I like to take my hole punching plier upside down, and that way then I can see where I've got my dot, and I can see that through, and obviously you're going to have a difficult time, but I can actually see that black dot right through the hole there, and that will allow me to make certain that I pierce it just where it should be. Now, you don't want to pull these off. You need to just kind of work them off of your pliers so as to not break this piercing pin. So I'm going to take just a minute here and pierce through all of these, and then we will be ready to assemble. Okay, everything has been punched. You will also note here at the very end I've only punched one hole, and that again is because I intend to use this as part of my toggle, just integrating the whole piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up some of my jump rings. It's important to remember that you never want to pull a jump ring open, rather you just want to twist it open, and that will allow you to be able to close it and still maintain a nice circle. Okay, and then you're going to close this back up. You want to get it as tight as possible so that you don't see your seam. So here's our piece. Now you'll notice that I've also added a couple of extra jump rings, and I think I'll probably add at least one more. And that is so that when I go to try to place my toggle through the hole in the last ring here, that I have enough material to actually get through that hole to allow the toggle to enter completely. So what I like to do is, with my toggles, I do a number of them. This one is going to be the most basic, most simple toggle that you can make. So what I'm going to do is make a piece that's several inches long, well, probably like 2. And I'm just going to cut that off. I'm going to use a pair of round nose pliers, and I'm just going to twist a small loop into the middle of that, like so. So something very simple, and like I said, it's just an easy little twist here. Just place this on here. You want to make certain that when your toggle happens to fold over or go over to one of the sides, that loop, that it doesn't come out of the hole here. So you need to pull this over to the side here and make certain that you cut this so that it's long enough that if it does go over to one of the sides, it's not going to fall out. So I'll just mark that with my Sharpie. Pull this back over here to the other side, maybe. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And what I've done is kind of shot for the middle of that. And now when I lay this in here, you'll see that at the widest part here, my toggle is approximately as long as my piece happens to be on this. It's not always going to be the case. But at this point, I would actually just trim these ends off, and then I'm going to take my hammer and flatten these areas right here. I will also give a tap here in the middle, just so that I can make sure that everything is nice and tight. I've brought this over to my bench pin, or my bench block rather, and what I'm going to do is just hold it on here. I've got my planishing hammer. Kind of hammer my edges here, just to give it a nice flare. It's also going to kind of harden things. Now, in addition to that, I am going to strike right here on the loop itself and flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And again, that's going to help give us some more strength. So you want to make certain that the material that you're using is thick enough. This happens to be 16 gauge, and where we're working with such a small piece, it actually has a lot of really good strength, so I'm not too concerned about that. So for the final step, what I need to do is open up my jump ring. So I have my jump ring here. And I'm going to slip my toggle in. close this back up. And for the final test, you want to bring your end over, slip it up through and in. You want to slide it to the edges and everything like that just to make certain that it's not going to slip out. And you now have your bracelet with an integrated toggle.